Sioux chief's infant is dying, refusing to eat for days, until a mysterious white widow arrives from a distant town and does something no one expects. What did she whisper that changed everything forever? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The harsh winter of 1876 had descended upon the Dakota Territory, transforming the rolling plains into a vast, white expanse. Chief Howling Wolf of the Sioux tribe stood alone at the entrance of his teepee, his weathered face etched with lines of worry. His young son, Little Thunder, had refused to eat for days, and none of the tribe's remedies had worked. Inside the teepee, Little Thunder's cries pierced the silence. The infant was barely 6 months old, and since the passing of his mother during childbirth, he had known only the care of his father and the tribe's women. But now, as if struck by some invisible ailment, he refused the milk and broth that had sustained him. "Great Spirit," Howling Wolf whispered to the wind, "do not take my son as you took his mother." Miles away, in the small settlement of Oak Ridge, Sarah Bennett wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders as she stepped out into the cold. At 32, the widow had lived alone for 3 years since her husband Thomas had been killed in a mining accident. The townsfolk called her the White Widow, not just for her fair complexion and light blonde hair, but for the way she seemed to drift through life like a ghost since Thomas's death. Sarah was known for her healing touch. The local doctor often sent for her when children fell ill, as she had a way with them that seemed almost magical. Perhaps it was her gentle voice or her understanding eyes, but children who refused medicine from others would take it willingly from her hands. That morning, as Sarah collected herbs from her small garden shed, a knock came at her door. It was Jacob Miller, the town's trader, who often ventured into Indian territory to exchange goods. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, removing his hat, "I've just returned from the Sioux camp. Chief Howling Wolf's infant son is refusing food. He's growing weaker by the day." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Why would the chief send for me?" "He didn't," Jacob replied, "but I've seen what you can do with the children here. The chief is desperate. He's tried everything their medicine woman suggested. The boy's mother passed during childbirth, and now—" He trailed off, the implication clear. Sarah gazed at the photograph of Thomas on her mantel. She hadn't ventured far from Oak Ridge since his death, finding comfort in the familiar. But something stirred within her, a purpose she had lost along with her husband. "When would we leave?" she asked, her decision already made. "Now, if possible, the journey will take us most of the day," Jacob said, relief evident in his voice. As Sarah packed her herbs, remedies, and warmest clothes, she felt a strange sensation, like a thread pulling her toward the unknown. Perhaps this was what she needed, to be needed again. The journey was arduous. The wind cut through their layers of clothing as Jacob's wagon trudged through the snow-covered trails. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the chief and his son. She had heard stories of Howling Wolf, a proud leader who had fought bravely to protect his people's lands from encroaching settlers. She wondered how he would receive her, a white woman entering their sacred space. "The chief speaks English," Jacob mentioned as they approached the camp. "He was educated by missionaries for a time before returning to his people. It should make things easier." The Sioux camp came into view as the sun began its descent. Smoke from several teepees rose toward the darkening sky. Children stopped their play to watch the wagon approach, and warriors stood alert, hands resting on weapons until they recognized Jacob. Chief Howling Wolf emerged from his teepee, his tall figure commanding respect. His dark eyes settled on Sarah with a mixture of suspicion and hope. "Jacob Miller," the chief acknowledged the trader before turning his gaze to Sarah. "You bring a healer? This is Sarah Bennett," Jacob introduced her. "She has a way with children who refuse to eat or take medicine." Sarah stepped down from the wagon, feeling the weight of the chief's assessment. "I cannot promise anything," she said honestly, "but I would like to try to help your son." Howling Wolf studied her for a long moment, pride warring with desperation on his face. Finally, he nodded and gestured toward his teepee. "My son has not eaten in 4 days. His strength fades like the winter sun." As Sarah entered the warm interior of the teepee, she saw Little Thunder lying on a small bed of furs. His tiny face was flushed with fever, his cries now weak from exhaustion. An elderly woman, The tribe's medicine woman, sat beside him, singing softly. Sarah approached slowly, kneeling beside the infant. She placed a gentle hand on his forehead, feeling the heat radiating from his skin. Little Thunder's eyes fluttered open, dark and questioning, so like his father's. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her voice soft as a spring breeze. "I'm here to help you." The medicine woman watched with curious eyes as Sarah opened her small bag of remedies. Outside the teepee, the wind howled like a hungry wolf, but inside the air hung thick with hope and apprehension. "May I?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the infant. The medicine woman, understanding Sarah's intention if not her words, nodded and moved aside. Sarah gently lifted Little Thunder, cradling him against her chest. The baby's cries softened to whimpers as she began to hum a lullaby, one her mother had sung to her, and one she had always imagined singing to her own children someday. "What is his condition?" she asked Howling Wolf, who stood watching with arms crossed over his chest. "He cries when we try to feed him," the chief explained. "He turns away from milk and broth. The fever came 3 days ago." Sarah nodded, her mind working through possibilities. She examined the infant carefully, noting his swollen gums and the way he flinched when she touched near his jaw. Recognition dawned in her eyes. "He's teething," she said, "and I think there may be an infection in his mouth making it painful to eat." The chief's brow furrowed. "Our medicine woman suggested this, but none of her remedies have eased his pain." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small jar of honey mixed with willow bark extract, a remedy she had perfected over years of helping the children of Oak Ridge. "This will help with the pain and reduce the fever," she explained, dipping her finger into the mixture. "May I?" After a moment of hesitation, Howling Wolf nodded. Sarah gently rubbed the mixture on Little Thunder's gums. The baby squirmed at first, but then his eyes widened at the sweet taste. His cries ceased as the natural pain reliever began to work. "Now we'll try some broth," Sarah said, "but we must go slowly." The medicine woman brought a small bowl of bone broth that had been kept warm by the fire. Sarah dipped a clean cloth into it and let a few drops fall onto Little Thunder's lips. After a moment of uncertainty, the infant accepted the offering. "He's eating," Howling Wolf whispered, a rare smile breaking across his stern features. "Just a little for now," Sarah cautioned. "Too much too quickly could make him ill again." As the night deepened, Sarah remained by Little Thunder's side, offering small amounts of broth every hour. The infant's fever began to subside, and his cries transformed into the contented coos of a baby finding relief. The chief sat across the fire, watching the white woman tend to his son with a gentleness he had not expected. "Why did you come?" he asked finally. "Our peoples are not friends." Sarah looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. "Suffering knows no boundaries, Chief Howling Wolf. I have known loss, as have you. Perhaps that is why I came." Something passed between them then, an understanding that transcended the conflicts of their peoples. They were simply two souls who had felt the sharp sting of grief, now joined in the effort to preserve a fragile life. As dawn approached, Little Thunder finally fell into a peaceful sleep. Sarah, exhausted from the journey and the night's vigil, found herself nodding off beside the infant. She was vaguely aware of someone, the chief, placing a warm blanket around her shoulders before she succumbed to slumber. She dreamed of Thomas that night, but for the first time since his death, the dream was not tinged with sorrow. Instead, he smiled at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always had when he was proud of her. Sarah awoke to sunlight filtering through the teepee's opening. Little Thunder was still sleeping soundly, his breathing even and strong. The medicine woman sat nearby, watching over both of them. Outside, Sarah could hear the sounds of the camp coming to life. Children's laughter, the crackle of morning fires, the soft nickering of horses. She stepped out of the teepee, blinking in the bright winter sunshine. Howling Wolf stood a short distance away, speaking with Jacob and several tribal elders. When he saw Sarah, he approached her, his face solemn but his eyes lighter than they had been the previous day. "My son took milk this morning," he said. "The medicine woman gave him some while you slept." Relief washed over Sarah. "That's wonderful news. The worst has passed, I believe, though we should continue with the remedy for another day or two." The chief nodded, then hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. The elders have asked that you stay until we are certain Little Thunder is fully recovered. Sarah glanced at Jacob, who shrugged. I need to return to town today, the trader said, but I could come back for you in a few days. The request surprised Sarah. She had expected to return to Oak Ridge that day, to her quiet house and solitary routine, but something about the camp, the sense of community, of purpose, called to her in a way she hadn't felt in years. I will stay, she decided, until the boy is well. Howling Wolf's expression did not change, but he inclined his head in a gesture of gratitude. Then you will be our honored guest. My sister, Mourning Dove, will see to your needs. As Jacob prepared to depart, Sarah found herself introduced to Mourning Dove, a woman about her own age with kind eyes and a reserved smile. Despite the language barrier, the two women communicated through gestures and the few words Mourning Dove knew in English. Throughout the day, Sarah continued to care for Little Thunder, whose improvement was remarkable. By evening, he was taking milk regularly, and the fever had not returned. The tribe's children, initially shy, began to approach Sarah with curious glances and tentative smiles. She showed them how to make simple toys from twigs and cloth, bridging the cultural divide with the universal language of play. As the day waned, Sarah found herself sitting beside the central fire, watching as the tribe gathered for the evening meal. Howling Wolf joined her, offering a wooden bowl of stew. You have brought life back to my son, he said quietly, and to this camp. We have had little to celebrate these past months. Sarah accepted the stew, touched by his words. I've done only what anyone with knowledge of healing would do. No, Howling Wolf disagreed, his voice firm. You have done what only someone with a kind heart would do. My people have known much cruelty at the hands of whites. Your kindness is unexpected. As they ate in companionable silence, Sarah realized that for the first time in 3 years, the weight of grief that had pressed upon her chest had lightened. In helping Little Thunder, she had somehow helped herself as well. That night, as stars punctured the vast darkness above the camp, Sarah felt a sense of belonging that had eluded her since Thomas's death. Here, among people who had every reason to distrust her, she had found acceptance. And in the eyes of a stern chief who had lost as much as she had, she glimpsed a reflection of her own journey from despair toward healing. Little did she know that her stay in the Sioux camp would extend far beyond a few days, and that the thread of destiny that had pulled her there was only beginning to unravel its purpose. Days stretched into weeks as the winter maintained its grip on the Dakota Territory. Little Thunder thrived under Sarah's care, his chubby cheeks regaining their color, his laughter becoming a common sound within the chief's teepee. Sarah had planned to return to Oak Ridge after a few days, but a fierce blizzard had made the trails impassable, and Jacob had been unable to return for her as planned. Strangely, Sarah found she didn't mind. Each morning, she woke with a sense of purpose that had been absent from her life in Oak Ridge. The tribe had accepted her presence with growing warmth, particularly after Little Thunder's recovery. The women invited her to join their daily activities, preparing food, tanning hides, beating moccasins. Through these shared tasks, Sarah began to learn their language, one word at a time. Mourning Dove proved to be a patient teacher, correcting Sarah's pronunciation with gentle smiles. You speak like a bird with a pebble in its mouth, she teased one afternoon as they worked together, stringing beads for a ceremonial dress. Sarah laughed, attempting the difficult word again. Is that any better? A smaller pebble, perhaps, Mourning Dove replied with a grin. As for Chief Howling Wolf, Sarah noticed a gradual change in his demeanor. The stern mask he wore in public occasionally slipped when they were alone with Little Thunder. She caught glimpses of the man beneath the leader, a father who sang soft songs to his son, who carved tiny wooden animals for him to grasp in his small hands. One evening, as Sarah sat by the fire in the chief's teepee, mending a tear in one of her dresses, Howling Wolf entered with Little Thunder in his arms. The baby reached for Sarah immediately, a wide, toothless grin lighting up his face. He knows who saved him, Howling Wolf said, handing his son to her. As do I. Sarah cradled the infant, touched by the chief's words. He would have recovered eventually. Children are resilient. Perhaps, Howling Wolf conceded, sitting across from her. But not all wounds heal without help. His dark eyes met hers, and Sarah sensed he was speaking of more than just his son's illness. "Your husband," he said after a moment. "Jacob told me he was killed in a mining accident." Sarah nodded, her fingers automatically seeking the wedding band she still wore. 3 years ago, the mine collapsed. Thomas was the foreman. He went back in to save 2 of his men. "He was brave," Howling Wolf observed. "He was," Sarah agreed, a small smile touching her lips. "Brave and kind and stubborn as the day is long. We had 10 good years together." "And no children?" the chief asked, his tone gentle. Sarah shook her head. "We tried. It wasn't meant to be." She looked down at Little Thunder, who had fallen asleep in her arms. "I always thought that was my greatest sorrow, until I lost Thomas and realized what true grief was." Howling Wolf was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "My wife Singing Bird died bringing Little Thunder into the world," he finally said. "She was the daughter of a great chief from another band. Our marriage brought peace between our peoples, but she was more than a political alliance to me." His voice grew soft. "She was my heart." Sarah felt the weight of his confession, understanding what it cost this proud man to reveal such vulnerability. "And now Little Thunder is your heart," she said. The chief nodded. "And my greatest fear." When he would not eat when the fever came, he trailed off, his hands clenching. "I could not lose him too." "You won't," Sarah assured him. "He grows stronger every day." Their eyes met across the fire, and something shifted between them, a recognition of shared pain, but also of the possibility that grief need not be the end of one story. The following days brought subtle changes to their interactions. Howling Wolf began to seek out Sarah's company, not just for matters concerning his son. He showed her the sacred places of his tribe, explaining their traditions and beliefs. Sarah listened with genuine interest, honored by his willingness to share these aspects of his culture. In turn, she told him stories of her life before Oak Ridge, of growing up on a farm in Pennsylvania, of meeting Thomas at a county fair, of their journey west in search of opportunity. Howling Wolf was particularly interested in her knowledge of plants and healing, often accompanying her as she gathered herbs at the edges of the camp. "Your medicine and our medicine," he commented one day as she identified a particular root with healing properties. Different paths to the same truth. The winter began to release its hold on the land. Patches of earth emerged from beneath the melting snow, and the first tender shoots of spring grasses appeared. With the improving weather came increased activity from other tribes and from white settlers. Scouts brought news of cavalry movements to the south, and tension crept back into the camp. "There is talk of forcing all Sioux onto the reservation," Howling Wolf told Sarah one evening as they walked along the creek that ran near the camp. Little Thunder was securely wrapped against his father's chest, babbling happily. "They want our hunting grounds for the gold seekers and the railroad." Sarah felt a pang of distress. She had come to care deeply for these people, for Mourning Dove's friendship, for the children's laughter, for the elders' wisdom, and for Howling Wolf, whose quiet strength and devotion to his people had awakened feelings in her that she had thought died with Thomas. "What will you do?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "We will resist," he said simply. "This land is our mother. We cannot abandon her." Sarah nodded, understanding his position even as she feared the consequences. She had seen enough of both worlds to know that the tide of white settlement could not be turned back, no matter how just the native cause might be. "And what of you, Sarah Bennett?" Howling Wolf asked, stopping to face her. "Jacob Miller will return soon. The trails are passable now. Will you go back to your town?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Sarah looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her over these weeks. She thought of her empty house in Oak Ridge, of the life that had felt like a pale shadow after Thomas's death. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came here to heal your son, but I think perhaps I was the one who needed healing." Howling Wolf studied her face, his expression softening. "Then perhaps the Great Spirit guided your steps to us for a reason." That night, Sarah lay awake in the teepee she now shared with Mourning Dove and her daughters. Her thoughts were a tumult of conflicting emotions. She had not expected to find a new beginning among the Sioux, had not imagined that her heart could open again after Thomas. Yet here she was, caught between two worlds, facing a decision that would alter the course of her life. Mourning Dove's voice came softly through the darkness. "Your heart is troubled, sister." Sarah turned toward her friend. "How did you know?" "Your sighs are louder than the night birds," Mourning Dove replied with gentle humor. Then, more seriously, "You care for my brother." It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. "Yes, but our worlds are so different. There would be consequences for both of us." "That is true," Mourning Dove acknowledged. "The path would not be easy, but is a path worth walking if it presents no challenge?" Sarah pondered her friend's words as sleep finally claimed her. In her dreams, she saw Thomas again. This time, he was walking away from her toward a brilliant light. He turned once, smiling, and gestured for her to continue on her own journey. She awoke with tears on her cheeks but clarity in her heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage. The woman who had drifted through life like a ghost was gone. In her place stood someone who had rediscovered the capacity to love, to hope, to build a future, even in the most unexpected of places. As dawn broke over the camp, Sarah stepped outside to greet the day. Howling Wolf stood near his teepee, Little Thunder in his arms, both watching the sunrise. The chief turned as if sensing her presence, and the look they exchanged needed no words. Sarah Bennett, the White Widow of Oak Ridge, had found her home. Spring had fully awakened the prairie by the time Jacob Miller's wagon appeared on the horizon. Birds returned from their winter retreats, filling the air with song, and wildflowers dotted the landscape with splashes of color. The camp had moved to its summer location near the bend of a river, where fishing was plentiful and the hunting grounds were rich. Sarah spotted the wagon first during her morning herb gathering. Her heart constricted at the sight. She had known this day would come, the day when she would have to make her choice known to the outside world. Word spread quickly through the camp. By the time Jacob arrived, Howling Wolf stood waiting, his face impassive but his eyes betraying his concern. Little Thunder, now nearly 9 months old and beginning to crawl, sat contentedly on a blanket nearby, watched over by Mourning Dove. "Mrs. Bennett," Jacob called as he brought his wagon to a halt. "I feared the worst when I couldn't get back before now. The Army has been patrolling these territories, making travel difficult for those of us who trade with the tribes." He climbed down, removing his hat. "But I see you're well, more than well, by the looks of it." Sarah approached the trader, genuinely glad to see him despite the complexity his arrival introduced. "Mr. Miller, your timing is impeccable. We were just beginning to wonder if you'd forgotten about me." "Forget the only healer who's earned the respect of both Oak Ridge and the Sioux?" "Not likely," Jacob replied with a chuckle. Then, more seriously, "The town has missed you, Mrs. Bennett. Doc Wilson in particular says no one has your touch with the little ones." Sarah felt the weight of her former life pressing upon her. "And how are things in Oak Ridge?" "Much the same," Jacob said, "though there's talk of the railroad coming through next year. Progress, they call it." He glanced at Howling Wolf, who had approached silently. "Chief, Jacob Miller," the chief acknowledged with a slight nod. "You return at a time of change." Jacob looked between Sarah and Howling Wolf, a dawning understanding in his eyes. "I see." Sarah took a deep breath. "Mr. Miller, I won't be returning to Oak Ridge with you." The trader's eyebrows rose, but he didn't seem entirely surprised. "That's a significant decision, Mrs. Bennett. Are you certain?" "I am," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "My life is here now, with the tribe, with—" She glanced at Howling Wolf, who stood tall and proud beside her. "With my son," the chief completed for her. "And with me, if she will have me as her husband." Jacob's expression registered shock, then concern. "You understand what this means, Mrs. Bennett? The town might not understand. And the government, they're not kind to whites who go native, as they call it." "I understand the challenges," Sarah said firmly, "but I also understand where I belong now. My house in Oak Ridge. I'd like you to sell it for me if you would. Use the money to bring supplies for the tribe on your trading visits." Jacob rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It won't be easy. There are those who won't trade with me if they know I'm still dealing with the Sioux, especially with the Army pushing for all tribes to move to the reservation." "We're not asking for easy," Howling Wolf said. Only for respect of our choice. After a moment, Jacob nodded. I'll do what I can, and I'll bring word when I return this way. He turned to Sarah. Is there anything you'd like me to bring from your house? Personal items? Sarah thought of the photograph of Thomas, the few pieces of jewelry, the books she'd cherished. Yes, she decided. I'll make a list. As Sarah wrote her requests on a scrap of paper, the camp gathered to witness this unusual exchange. Morning Dove brought Little Thunder to them, and the baby immediately reached for Sarah, babbling his version of Mama, a name he had recently begun to call her. He knows his mother, Howling Wolf said, loud enough for all to hear. And our people know a wise woman when the Great Spirit sends one to us. Jacob accepted Sarah's list, tucking it into his pocket. I wish you happiness, Mrs. Bennet. It's clear you found something special here. Sarah, she corrected him. Just Sarah now. She took Howling Wolf's hand in hers, a gesture that sent a ripple of murmurs through the watching tribe. Such public displays of affection were not common among the Sioux, but the chief allowed it, his fingers tightening around hers. After Jacob's departure, Howling Wolf called a council meeting. The elders gathered in the central lodge, their faces solemn as they considered the implications of their chief taking a white woman as his wife. The spirits have guided this woman to us, Howling Wolf told them. She saved my son when our own medicine could not. She has learned our ways, respected our traditions, and shared her knowledge freely. I ask for your blessing on our union. The eldest of the council, Greyhawk, spoke after a long silence. The path you choose is difficult, my chief. The white man's government will use this against you. They will say you are no longer fit to lead. They already seek reasons to remove me, Howling Wolf countered. I would rather stand with truth in my heart than bend to their expectations. Morning Dove stepped forward. My brother speaks with wisdom. I have watched this woman. Her spirit is of our people, though her skin is pale. And my nephew calls her mother. What stronger sign do we need? One by one, the elders spoke. Some expressed concerns, others support. Sarah listened, understanding most of what was said through her months of learning their language. When invited to speak, she addressed them in their own tongue, her words carefully chosen. I came as a healer, but remain as a daughter of this tribe, she said. My heart belongs here now. If you will accept me, I will stand with you through whatever challenges come. Her use of their language, imperfect but sincere, swayed several of the hesitant elders. By the council's end, a consensus had been reached. The tribe would accept Sarah as Howling Wolf's wife, with a ceremony to take place at the next full moon. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations. Sarah was instructed in the traditions of a Sioux bride by Morning Dove and the other women. They created a special dress for her, adorned with intricate beadwork and symbols of healing and strength. Sarah, in turn, shared her own traditions. She taught the women to make the honey-sweet cakes her mother had baked for special occasions. She showed them different ways to use the herbs they gathered, combining her knowledge with theirs to create new remedies. The night before the ceremony, Morning Dove brought Sarah to the river for the traditional cleansing ritual. Under the stars, she helped Sarah bathe in the cool water, singing the ancient songs of her people. Tomorrow you become truly my sister, Morning Dove said, as she draped a blanket around Sarah's shoulders. No longer will you be called the White Widow, but Rising Sun, for you have brought new light to our people. Sarah embraced her friend, tears of gratitude warming her cheeks. I never thought I would find a family again after Thomas died. Now I have a sister, a son, and soon a husband. Morning Dove smiled. The Great Spirit's path is not always straight, but it leads where we are meant to go. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. The entire tribe gathered to witness the union of their chief and the woman who had crossed boundaries of culture and prejudice to join them. Little Thunder, dressed in his finest ceremonial clothes, sat happily in his aunt's lap, occasionally calling out Mama when he caught sight of Sarah. Howling Wolf waited at the center of the gathering, his chiefly regalia replaced by simpler attire that spoke of the man rather than the leader. When Sarah appeared in her beaded dress, her blonde hair adorned with feathers and flowers, a rare smile broke across his face. The ceremony combined elements of both cultures. They exchanged vows in the Sioux tradition, binding their hands with a sacred cord. Then, in a nod to Sarah's heritage, They exchanged simple rings that she had asked Jacob to bring on his last visit, her own wedding band from Thomas, and a new one for Howling Wolf, crafted from silver. 2 circles unbroken, she explained to the tribe. Like our 2 peoples, different but complete. As the new couple shared the ceremonial meal with their tribe, scouts arrived with urgent news. A column of cavalry had been spotted to the south, heading in their direction. "They come too soon," Howling Wolf said, rising to his feet. "We must prepare." The celebration transformed into organized activity as the tribe prepared for potential conflict. Warriors readied their weapons, while women gathered essential items in case they needed to move camp quickly. Sarah found herself at the center of a difficult moment, her first test as the chief's wife. "What can I do?" she asked Howling Wolf. He regarded her steadily. "You can be who you are, a bridge between worlds. The soldiers may listen to one of their own." Understanding dawned on Sarah. He wanted her to act as an intermediary. The thought terrified her, but she nodded. "I'll try." As the cavalry approached, Howling Wolf, Sarah, and several elders rode out to meet them. Sarah wore her beaded dress but draped a shawl from her old life over her shoulders, a visible symbol of her dual identity. The cavalry captain halted his men when he saw the small delegation. His eyes widened at the sight of Sarah. "Ma'am, are you being held against your will?" "No, Captain," Sarah replied firmly. "I am here by choice. I am Sarah Bennett, formerly of Oak Ridge. Now I am the wife of Chief Howling Wolf." The captain's expression registered disbelief. "Mrs. Bennett, if you're under duress—" "I assure you I am not," Sarah interrupted. "I came to this tribe as a healer and found a home. What brings you to peaceful hunting grounds with armed men?" The captain shifted uncomfortably. "Orders, ma'am. All Sioux are to report to the reservation by month's end." Howling Wolf remained silent, allowing Sarah to speak. She straightened in her saddle. "This tribe has committed no hostile acts. They hunt on traditional grounds and trade fairly with settlers. Forcing them from their home would be an injustice. I don't make policy, ma'am. I follow orders." "Then follow this order, Captain," Sarah said boldly. "Report to your superiors that you found a peaceful camp with a white woman who has been treated with nothing but respect. Tell them that this tribe poses no threat and deserves to be left in peace." The captain hesitated, studying Sarah's resolute expression. "You understand that by staying here, you're placing yourself outside the protection of the United States government?" "I understand that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," Sarah replied. "Protected by people who judge character rather than skin color." After a tense moment, the captain nodded. "I'll report what I've seen, but I can't promise it will change anything. The tide is turning against free-roaming tribes." "We ask only for time," Howling Wolf finally spoke. "Time to live as we have always lived, in harmony with the land." The captain gave a curt nod. "I can give you that much, at least for now." He tipped his hat to Sarah. "Good day, Mrs. Howling Wolf." As the cavalry departed, Sarah let out a shaky breath. Howling Wolf reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "You have the courage of a Sioux warrior," he said with pride. That night, as the tribe celebrated not only the wedding, but also the temporary reprieve from immediate threat, Sarah sat beside her new husband near the central fire. Little Thunder slept peacefully in her lap, his small hand curled around her finger. "What lies ahead will not be easy," Howling Wolf said quietly. "The white man's government will send others after these soldiers leave." "I know," Sarah replied, "but we will face it together. Perhaps our union can show others that different worlds can coexist, can even become one." Howling Wolf gazed into the fire. "Perhaps, or perhaps we must create our own world, neither fully Sioux nor fully white, but something new." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. Like Little Thunder, born of one world but raised in the wisdom of two. Around them, the tribe continued their celebration, dancing, singing, sharing stories. Sarah looked at the faces that had become family to her, at the man who had helped her heart heal, at the child who had brought them together. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges from both societies, but Sarah Bennett, now rising son of the Sioux, had found something worth fighting for. In the most unexpected place, she had discovered not just purpose but love, and in the arms of a man whose culture was different from her own, but whose heart beat in rhythm with hers, she had found home. As the stars wheeled overhead, Sarah closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had guided her steps from grief to joy, from loneliness to belonging.